Hello again everyone from Tokyo, Japan, and welcome back to Japan Vintage Camera, where I'm coming to you again from Hinokicho Park. Kind of had to move places. I was shooting a video in another part of the park a little while ago, and then I just kind of got bombed by preschoolers. And they're all kind of fun to have hanging around and all that, but there tend to be like a kind of a huge preschool brawl taking place around me, so I decided it'd probably be a little bit quieter to come over to this side of the park and make the video. It's a nice day here. That's why all the kids are here. The weather's getting gradually better, and a sure sign of the season changing is that the plum blossoms are starting to fall. And that usually means the weather is turning warm, and we have maybe 2 to 3 weeks before the cherry blossoms come. So a wonderful sign to see the plum blossoms falling. We have a few of the plum trees located around here in the park, different colors and stuff. That's kind of the high point of the February-March season, or the plum blossoms, and then of course the big, I guess, start to the spring will be the cherry blossoms, which should be here, as I said, 2 to 3 weeks we hope. Anyway, the subject of today's video is going to be one about, just as the title of the video says, a Holy Grail camera. Now, when I use the words Holy Grail, I kind of think of it as something which you know exists, or you've heard exists, that you've wanted to see, but you've never been able to find or see. And in that case, one of my Holy Grail cameras has always been the black paint Canon P rangefinder camera. Now, this may not be your Holy Grail camera, but I've been looking for one of these for almost 15 years now. And as I live in Tokyo and I kind of prowl the camera shops around here, this is the first one which I've actually seen in real life. And when I came across, I was quite surprised to find it. And though it wasn't cheap, I found that I just had to have it. So finally, after all this time, I finally have my original black paint Canon P rangefinder camera. I know that I did a video in the past about the Canon P, and I'll kind of review the technical specifications and all that later on in this video. But the Canon P, the P stands for the word populaire, the kind of the Frenchy version of the English word popular, or maybe England borrowed it from France. I'm not sure where it comes from. Probably England took it from France, but that's what it was called here in Japan, and it was quite a popular or populaire camera. They made and sold quite a few of these. They were kind of a simplified version of the Canon 7 camera, and this was, I think, Canon's answer to the Nikon S3 rangefinder camera, but I think quite a few more Canon Ps were made than the Nikon S3, as it was a less expensive camera, and the Leica L Mount was quite popular. And the Canon P, of course, accepts Leica L Mount lenses, and these lenses were made by, of course, Leica, but also by Canon, and by, let's see, Minolta made them, Nikon, Yashica, Leotax, and a host of other camera makers all made lenses in this mount. So that made sales of these cameras desirable. If you had an earlier Leica camera, or you had a really wonderful Leica lens and you wanted a camera to be able to fit this lens onto, Canon P was a good choice. So like 99.9 something% of these cameras came in the chrome-plated silver finish. Some were fitted, or some came with the original black finish. A lot of cameras were repainted over the years, and I see those quite often on the internet for sale, and for sale in some of the local shops here. And there are people who have kind of a business of repainting cameras, and the Canon P is a popular camera to get painted black. The original ones, you can kind of identify them first for the fact that they aren't chrome plated underneath the black paint. That doesn't necessarily mean that they are raw brass underneath. This one is raw brass on the top cover, but not so on the bottom cover. But the bottom cover isn't chrome plated, it's nickel plated. And other of the black paint cameras, like the, say, VT or whatever, those are usually entirely, the black paint cameras have nickel plating all over the body underneath the paint. And it's very easy to spot the difference between the nickel and the chrome, because first, the nickel has a more satiny finish, not as bright as the chrome. And when the paint wears off of the nickel finish, it wears off rather than scratches off. So it's very, very easy to scratch the paint on a chrome-plated camera, it's not so easily scratched on the nickel-plated camera. The nickel provides actually a really good surface for paint to stick onto. Chrome does not. These cameras were came with I guess special versions of the Canon light meter and lenses, and there were black paint lenses which were made specifically for these cameras. And if the cameras aren't hard enough already to find, the lenses are even more hard to find. Though honestly, I have seen maybe 3 or 4 of the black paint lenses for sale here over the years in Japan, though this was the very first real black paint camera which I've come across. When I got this camera, I wasn't really paying attention to what lens came on it. I knew that it had a lens fitted to it, but I was more interested in the camera than the lens. When I got the camera and I looked closely, I noticed it had a Nikon lens, a Nippon Kogaku lens. And this one happens to be the 2.8 centimeter f3.5 lens, which is actually, I think, my favorite wide-angle rangefinder lens. Years ago, I bought a rather beat-up and ratty old Nikon SP, which was fitted with one of these lenses. And without even taking it home to do anything with the camera, I just loaded a roll of black and white film in it, and I went walking around Shinjuku, and I started taking pictures of the local Shinjuku Summer Festival. And I really didn't have any experience at all with the Nikon SP camera or the 28mm or 2.8 centimeter lens. But when I developed the film and I saw the results, I was quite happy. I really loved the quality of the images. I kind of like I don't know if you could say it has any kind of like Leica glow or anything like that, but I really loved the performance of the lens, and I loved how the images came out. And I hope that the summer here has at least enough normality that they are beginning to have the summer festivals again, and maybe I can go out and photograph a few more of them. But I got this lens with in the Leica L mount, which is much more scarce than the of course, Nikon mount lens. And of course, this camera doesn't have a viewfinder for the 28mm lens like the Nikon SP has. But when I got the camera, the guy who sold to me happened to throw in this old Canon 28mm finder, which kind of slides in on the top here, like so. And it has this nice little parallax correction lever here, which allows me to compensate for parallax correction. I kind of overdid it there, but yeah, it's a really wonderful camera, and this one is going to be a really good user. Something which I plan to take some photographs with as soon as I get some film put into it. Wonderful thing about this camera is, when you look at it right now, it looks kind of beat up and scratched and worn out, but this is actually after I have gone through this camera and cleaned it up. Last night I took it all the way apart. I took out all the components and I cleaned up everything, got all the fungus out of the rangefinder optics, and got that cleaned up. When I received the camera, I was surprised to find that the shutter was working well and working accurately at all speeds. And I know that this camera hadn't been shot in maybe 30 or 40 years, maybe even longer than that, but the shutter speeds were still spot on. The self-timer wasn't working properly, so I pulled it out and I cleaned it up and put it back in. Now it seems to be working fine. I'll knock on some wood over here. But otherwise, yeah, a wonderful camera. And that's one of the things which makes the Canon P a popular camera, is that it is really reliable. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Canon P and you're thinking about getting one of these and you find them for sale in a local shop or something, there are a few things that you need to look for when you are shopping for one. The most common problem with these cameras is the slow speed escapement gets dirty, and the slow speeds either don't work or they run too slowly. That is about a 10 or 15 minute repair on one of these cameras. It's quite easy to remove the body shell and reach the slow speed escapement and clean it up. The second most common problem is the shutter doesn't work properly at the 1/1000th speed. This is a common issue in all of the Canon P, Canon 7 cameras, and also some of the SLR cameras like the F1. That's usually fixed by increasing the tension on the leading shutter curtain. Usually the trailing curtain, there aren't any issues with that. It's just the tension in the spring is kind of diminished over the passage of 60 years. So you tighten it up a little bit, and it is adjustable on the bottom of the camera, and that will speed up the leading shutter curtain, and you should have the 1/1000th speed back again, and plus get the lower speeds back into spec. The other issue which these cameras have is that the shutter curtains don't close all the way. So if you're firing the camera, and you'll notice a gap on this side where light can get through. This happens in about 1 in 10 cameras which I come across. To clean this up, you remove this ring here, take off these 2 screws, remove the bottom cover, and in the middle here you'll see kind of a round spot which turns when the camera fires, and you'll see the flash contact wires. This is what usually sticks and causes the shutter not to close all the way. A little bit of solvent and lubricant cleans that up, and usually it's a 10-minute fix on this camera to get the shutter to work or to close properly. Other than that, the camera is really reliable, and that was one of the reasons why it was such a popular camera. Let's take a quick look at the features, controls, and functions, because maybe some of you haven't seen my other videos. First, we have the film rewind lever located here. We have a shoe for mounting a flash gun. This camera doesn't have a typical PC sync socket. There's one located on this side, but for mounting, they have this kind of odd flange here to allow you to use a different kind of flash bracket for the camera. And that's for like if you're using the light meter or something on here. This camera was available with an accessory light meter which clips on the top, and has another clip with an accessory shutter speed knob which grabs the shutter speed knob here on the bottom. This is the shutter speed knob as I've just described, and we have a full range of speeds from B in 1 second up to 1/1000th of a second. Next to that we have the shutter release button, which is black, so it denotes the original one. Most of the repainted cameras you find will not have this black shutter button. We have the release ring located around the shutter button. To release the winding mechanism, you have to turn it the other way, and then you can rewind the film. When you're ready to use the camera, turn it back to the A setting, and it's good to go. Here we have the film counter dial, and here we have the shutter winding and charging lever. On the back here we just have the eyepiece, and there's a screw on the eyepiece so you can remove it. Canon made available a few different diopter adjustment eyepieces which you have to remove the original to put on. You might be unlucky and get a camera which has a diopter eyepiece put on it, and you don't wear glasses, and you won't be able, you might see that you can't, for some reason you can't get it to focus properly, you can't see through it. It may not be a problem with the camera. Someone may have just fitted a diopter eyepiece to it. Here we have an ASA dial, which is just a reminder dial to let you know what kind of film you have loaded in the camera. Whether this works, it doesn't matter, works or doesn't work, or you don't use it. Just remember what film speed you have loaded in the camera and program that into your handheld light meter or your light meter app on your smartphone. Another giveaway of the original cameras, the black paint cameras, is the rings here for the neck strap are black painted, and they're not chrome underneath. On the front here we have the viewfinder eyepiece, and we have this rangefinder, I guess window I should say, and we have the main viewfinder. This camera has bright line frame lines for the 35mm through 135mm lenses. They don't switch between the different settings like on the Canon 7. They're visible at all times, but very convenient, and that's one less thing which can go wrong with the camera. If you remove this bezel ring underneath, this glass window twists, and when you twist this window, you turn it left or right, you can turn that to adjust the vertical adjustment on the rangefinder. We have a small access screw here, and this is for the horizontal adjustment for the rangefinder. If you take off this screw to adjust the rangefinder, make sure that you don't lose it because they're hard to find replacements for. Of course, here we have the self-timer lever, which I've already mentioned. The self-timer is more reliable on these cameras than it is on, say, twin lens reflex cameras or the old fixed lens rangefinder cameras. I don't worry too much about using the self-timer on these later Canon cameras. And of course we have the lens here, and as I said, this is the Leica L Mount style or M39 mount lens. You can fit just about any kind of these lenses on here. They just screw right on. Personally, I prefer either a 50mm lens or a 28mm lens. I like I guess the normal 50mm field of view for general photography or taking pictures of people. Whereas when I'm walking around the city and the smaller streets and stuff, I really love the 28mm focal length. On the bottom of the camera we have a standard 1/4" tripod socket, and here we have the mechanism or a locked lever, which is kind of a security feature to keep you from accidentally opening the film door. You lift it up and turn it, and that allows you to pull open on the lever here, and the door opens like so. Common problem these cameras have, it's not really a problem, just something you'll notice, is they usually have wrinkles on the shutter curtains. For whatever reason, this one doesn't have wrinkles on the shutter curtains. I think that just the guy kept the original lens on here for this particular lens and never changed it. So if you don't change the lenses and you're careful loading the film, you're probably never going to mess up the shutter curtains. On the other hand, even if the shutter curtains have dents or creases or whatever in them, it doesn't really affect how the camera operates. It'll work just as well with or without wrinkles. The Canon P does not have light seals like the Canon 7 does, so that's one less thing that you have to worry about. You don't have to worry about the debris from drying light seals getting into the camera. And if you get your camera and you buy one of these, wow, there's no light seals, I've got to put light seals in it. The Canon P doesn't use light seals. Loading the film is quite simple. You just pop open the rewind knob, drop your film cartridge in here, push this back down, pull your film leader across, stick it in the slot here. There's a white line and an arrow to let you know which way to turn it, which way it goes, and then simply wind the film and fire the shutter until the film is pulled over the take-up sprocket and the teeth on the sprocket are lined up in the holes on the film. Then close the film door and simply wind to the number 1 and the camera is ready to go. So my battery's getting a little bit low on here, so I'm not going to make this a really super long video. I'm really happy to get this camera, and I think I'm going to make a video of myself going out and actually using this camera and sharing the results that I get from it, so you kind of have an idea of what one of these cameras is capable of. Hopefully I can take photographs as well as, I don't know, I can take good photographs with it. Funny thing I noticed when I got this camera is the EP mark on the bottom of the lens here. And what that means is that the lens and possibly the camera itself was bought at a US military post exchange here in Japan. And they came with these marks so that, if you bought things from Japan and you brought them back to America, you didn't have to pay duties or anything like that. Because back in those days, there were still things like duties and things on cameras from Japan. We don't have that nowadays, but this was a concern in those days. And it kind of makes me wonder if this camera was owned by a US serviceman who used it who knows where, and it got back, and he had either stayed here or he sold the camera before he returned to America. Obviously this it's very unlikely that this camera was sent to America and lived there for years and then was sent back to Japan. So yeah, it's hard to say what the story is behind this camera, but judging by the appearance of this camera, whatever stories it has, there have to be lots of them and they must be very interesting. Anyway, I plan to be making more videos about more cameras in the future. I'm getting more and more interesting cameras like this one here, maybe sometimes even better than this one here if that's possible. If you'd like to see these videos, I'd appreciate it if you would subscribe. And if you like the video, of course that helps us here very much. And the more people I can get interested in watching these videos, the more cameras and videos I can get and make. So, thank you very much for watching, and I hope you tune in again soon.